Okay, 9 of you in person and 7 of you online. Let's see. Okay, do we have any questions on 1 through 6? Lucy? It depends on what the problem says. At the beginning here, I'm going to want you to do that because that way you're not as likely to mark things that you're just assuming. So you have to make sure that you're justifying, like, how do I know for sure that this is the case? Yes. If it is a multiple choice, or like as we do more of these, you'll just see that I'll just mark it and I won't necessarily write the reasons. But if it asks you to kind of explain or state the reasons, whatever, then you'll have to say that. Okay, so reminder, angle side side and side side angle, which are the same thing, do not make triangles congruent. So if they happen to be right triangles, then you can make them congruent by HL. HL stands for what? Oh, hypotenuse leg. So remember that they have to be right triangles. It's the only kind of triangle that has a hypotenuse. And then you have to know the hypotenuses, which are across from the right angles, right? You have to know that the hypotenuses are congruent, and then another pair of sides in the right triangles are congruent in order to use HL. So angle side side in general does not work. Specifically for right triangles, it works, but you don't call it angle side side, you call it HL. Okay, here's the next 6 of those. So when you have right angles, you can always use those as congruent angles. I really probably should have said for those, I'm also using that all right angles are congruent. That's actually a theorem. So I probably should have stated that technically. That was stupid. Questions on through number 12?
Do you have to put like reflexive property?
So when it says if they are,
okay.
That's asking you for like angle, side angle, and whatever, but it's also asking you to explain. So at the beginning, I'm going to always be doing that just because, again, I just want you to make sure that you're marking things, like you're able to justify why you're marking things. You're not just randomly marking things. Okay, and as we go along, I'll stop doing that as much, but we will do proofs also where you'll have to explain how you know that things are congruent. Paul?
For number 13, yeah, for them, like the first one will be the triangle YGX, and then just the triangle
QRX. Okay, so hold on a second. So remember that for the congruent statement, you have to have the vertices matched up correctly, but the way you write the first one is completely up to you. So if you write, you said ZYX. So Z has to match with R.
I said
YZX, okay. YZX. So we know that Y has to match with Q, and we know that Z has to match with R, and we know that X has to match with itself. So if you go YZX and QRX, like yours is the same as mine, it just looks different. So notice that sometimes the vertex will match to itself. Sometimes that's not the case. So on this one, because X in both triangles is the one that has the 3 congruent marks, that means that X will go with X. So that doesn't have to be the case. Okay, but there are lots of different variations of that as long as your vertices match up in the same order. Okay, for this one, because we have in this triangle, we have R with a single mark, but in this triangle, we have Q with a single mark. That means R doesn't go to R. So notice on this one, R goes to Q in the other triangle, and Q goes to R in the second triangle. So that means that when you cut this down the middle like that, it's not a reflection. Okay, that's not going to be a line of symmetry, because if you try to fold it over, you're going to have a single mark matching with a double mark. So R does not go to R, right? You would have to cut them apart and like rotate one of them to make them match up. So as long as you go, really what I usually do when I'm writing congruent statements, I'll just write, if one's marked with a single and then a double and then a triple, I'll just go in that order, right? Single, double, triple, and then same thing for the second one. Now you don't have to go in that order. You could go 3, 2, 1, or you could go 2, 1, 3, or whatever, as long as the correspondence matches things correctly. But sometimes the vertex goes to itself, sometimes it doesn't.
So when I'm writing congruent statements, if I write like triangle and then like congruent triangle URX, then do I need to include 5? What if it is like 5?
Okay, those are actually number 13, because everything is marked congruent. Those are actually congruent by definition, which after we've done all these shortcuts, you don't even have to use a definition anymore, because you wouldn't have to know all the parts. But because they have all the side lengths marked and they also have all the angle lengths marked, they're actually just using congruent, definition of congruence, which is there's a way to match up the vertices so that all the corresponding sides and all the corresponding angles are congruent. If all it says is a congruent statement, this is a congruent statement.
Okay.
That's all you'd have to write for that one. Yeah, but you could use, you could give a congruent statement for quadrilaterals or pentagons or any kind of polygons. So the shortcuts work for triangles. And now that we've done the shortcuts, you wouldn't have to use a definition of congruence now, but technically that's kind of what they're using because everything's marked. Okay. Now on the second page, notice how it says state what additional information. That means don't just mark it on the picture, actually write down what the information is that you know. Okay, so IJ and IK, sorry, IU. You could use JI and UI. The order doesn't matter for the first one as long as the second one matches. Okay, now notice the number 16, and this kind of happens with the angle and the side ones. There's two different possibilities. So I'm asking you what additional information must have to be given. Well, there's two different things that would work. You don't have to just be given this one. You could also be given this one. So on that picture, we know we have a pair of congruent angles and we have the reflexive segment, but we could have either those angles being congruent and then it would be the triangle would be congruent by angle side, or we could have the gray angles being congruent, in which case the triangles would be congruent by angle side. Okay, so on that kind of problem, you should be listing both options because you don't have to know that let's see, GFE, that the orange angles are congruent. Me giving you the gray angles congruent would also make the triangles congruent. So there's two different things that would be possibilities to be provided to you in order to make the triangles congruent by angle side. Okay, questions on 13 through 16? Okay, and then for 17 through 20, it's the same idea with number 19. There's two different pieces of information that would both give you the triangles congruent by angle side. Why on some of the angles can you just say angle C, like this is number 18. Why on some of them can you just use a single letter, like angle C is congruent to angle U, where on others you have to use the long name? Emily. Yeah, whenever there are vertices of the triangle that have multiple angles formed with that vertex, you're gonna have to use the long name. Up here, it's clear. If I say angle C, we know it's this one. I say angle U, we know it's that one, right? But on number 20, if I were to just say angle Q, for example, I wouldn't know if that's angle Q or that's angle Q or the whole angle is angle Q. Okay, so be careful if you have more than one angle with the same vertex, you have to use the long name. The other thing is that the vertices should match. So if I go PQR, then I need to go WQR. So the order here, even though like RQW would be the same angle, the order should match the correspondence. Okay, so if I start with P, go along the marked side and then along the reflexive side, I gotta do the same thing here. Go along the marked side and then along the reflexive side when I'm naming it. Okay, any questions for number 20? Okay, for the last problem, so you're showing the triangles are congruent by side, side, side. There should be calculations here. Okay, this is not write stuff down. This is like actually calculate. This is not guess. This is not just do stuff in your head and write something down. This is show me all the distances and that there are 3 pairs of congruent sides. So the triangles are congruent by side, side, side. Okay. If you did not do the work, and sometimes I write more than you need to write, like you don't necessarily have to have every one of those steps, but you know, I'm writing all the steps that you can follow in case you make a mistake, you can figure out where it happened. But there needs to be a few steps for each one of those calculations. Okay, I need to see something besides just an answer. If you need to take a picture of that, go ahead. If you didn't really do that the way you should have, you can take a picture of that to look at later. Okay, any other questions on homework problems? No? Okay, what I would like you to do right now is go back to your notes from Monday. So the video where I worked through some of the problems, but not all of them. On the 3rd page of those notes, I'm going to give you about 10 or 15 minutes to work out the rest of those so that you can kind of see how you're doing with ones that are a little bit more complicated. The ones that are on the review sheet are really not as complicated as maybe some of these are. So I want you to, as we said before, show when you mark things, explain why they're congruent, and then give the reason if the triangles are congruent. Okay, so the ones that I did on the video are the ones that are filled out there. The rest of them is what I'd like you to work on right now. Okay. So I'm going to make a little classwork grade for you to submit that to.
When it's side, side, side,
Uh-huh.
what do you put as like the, like for the second one? That's side, side, side. Like, what would be like the explaining part of it?
That's all you have to do. If they've actually marked everything you need, then you don't have to give any explanation. What you're explaining are the parts that you're marking yourself. Like, okay, how do I know these 2 segments are congruent? Or how do I know these 2 angles are congruent?
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. Yeah. The ones that I have the little triangles on there are the ones that I did not do on the video. Okay, just so you can check those a little easier. Ask me if you have any questions on anything. Questions on those 3? Okay, here's the 4 below that. I'm happy to talk through. I know that, again, the parallel line ones are the ones that are a little more difficult to see what's happening. So if you would like me to talk through either of those, I'm happy to do that. Does anybody want me to do this one? Okay, so I'm looking for where I got a blank one. So for this one, since you have parallel lines, again, the first thing I'd recommend you always do on these is stretch out the parallel lines so you can kind of see what's happening. So here's your parallel lines. And then there are 3 different lines to consider as a transversal, but if you're trying to get angles that are actually inside the triangles, we probably want to be looking at this transversal, right? Because that could give us like corresponding angles there, for example. So let's write everything else that we know. So we've got, since segment CD bisects segment AE, that means that those segments would be congruent, and that is definition of bisect or bisector. Okay, and then we have parallel was given, and then we have angle E, which is here, congruent to angle BCA, which is here. Now, again, you want to make sure that you notice that there's only one angle in the triangle that has a vertex of E, but you would have to use the long name BCA because if I said just angle C, I wouldn't know if it's that angle, or if it's this angle, or if it's this angle. Okay, and then our other corresponding angles there would work. So this would be if parallel lines are cut by transversal, then corresponding angles are congruent. And then the triangles would be congruent by angle side angle. Okay. Would anybody like me to talk through this one over here? That was the other one with parallels in that group. I'm going to go through that one. No? Uh-huh. Okay, so the question is, what's the difference between AAS and ASA? Let me draw a few little pictures here. I'll find a place to draw. Okay, so if you have 2 triangles, so if you have 2 triangles where what you're given is 2 pair of angles that are congruent, if it is ASA, the placement of the S is saying that it's between the 2 angles, right? It's an angle and then a side, then an angle. It's the included side. So when you look at this triangle, you want to think, well, which side is included between the 2 angles? The one that's between the 2 angles would be that one. So that's angle, side, angle. If you say angle, angle, side, let me go back to these. Okay, I'll go ahead and finish that since I'm in the middle of that. If you say angle, angle, side, this side is a non-included angle. So how many options are there to use angle, angle, side for the purple ones? There's 2 different ways you can have it, right? So angle, angle, side means you can't use the included side, but you can use either of the other 2. And you do want to make sure that they're corresponding to each other. So those 2, that would make it angle, angle, side, or these 2 would make it angle, angle, side. Okay, what you cannot use is the included side, because if you had that, then that would be angle, side, angle. So the order of the letters tells you it's 2 angles in a non-included side. So it's like angle, angle, and then a side. Angle, angle, and then a side. Okay, back to these. Let's see. The last one down here on the bottom corner, there's a theorem which you may not know. We're going to talk about isosceles triangles later in this chapter. So isosceles triangles, so I'm looking at the big triangle. The big triangle is an isosceles triangle, and isosceles triangles have congruent angles that are across from the 2 sides that you know. So that would be something to consider, but it doesn't actually help us. So even if I have those two angles marked congruent, it would be angle side side, which isn't going to work. So this is not something you necessarily know at this point, but even if you did know, it's not going to help you. Okay. But you always kind of want to make sure you've thought through all the different possibilities. But I would not expect you to know that yet because we haven't talked about that in this class, in this course. Okay, here are the ones that were kind of middle left. Oh, this is the one I already went over. So I guess this is the one you're looking at. Lucy. Which one was the school? Oh, this one. Because the placement of the angles. If it was side angle side, it would have to go side, then angle, then side. Okay, we don't have any reason to believe that those angles up there are congruent. So don't assume angle bisectors, don't assume perpendicular, right angles, don't assume midpoints. Make sure you're not assuming anything. Okay, and then I'll leave that one in the lower left corner has two different pairs of parallel lines. So you're going to have the orange pair of parallel with the green transversal will make the orange alternate interiors congruent. And then the purple parallels with the green transversal will make the purple angles congruent. And then using the reflexive, you got angle, side angle. I'm going to spray. Let me know good questions. As you're walking into the classroom, yeah, I'll take your test back. As you're walking into the classroom, you can know that's something to do. And with the spray, you have to be sitting on that for 5 minutes. Usually like 5 minutes to be off. Do any of you have questions? Any Zoom people?
No, I don't.
No? All right, tomorrow's quiz will be on, whoops. Tomorrow's quiz will be on ClassKick for you guys. So make sure that you are logging in through Google. Okay, so when you go to ClassKick and it says like, put in an email or else log in through Google, And then I'll have it assigned. You should be able to see it if you log in that way. I'm not sure. I think I might have you guys doing class cake also. I haven't decided that, but I have to decide by period A because they're taking it today. But yeah, I'm trying to figure out exactly how that's going to work. In the past, I didn't do that, but I might start doing that just because the number of people that are not in person. Okay, all of you who are online, just make sure you log into Zoom tomorrow morning, and then we'll go over the review for a few minutes and then take the quiz. Okay, have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.